The GPD Win 5 packaging is quite a bit larger than the previous generation, but it still follows the GPD classic minimalist packaging design. Lifting the lid, the GPD Win 5 host sits quietly at center stage, and you can tell the quality is a step up from a prototype just by looking at it. Underneath the console, there's a standard 80 watt-hour battery. When I was watching GPD's official channel, a lot of people were asking if the battery had to be purchased separately. I can tell you right now, GPD would never do something so foolish. The battery is standard, one of them. Below the battery is the instruction manual, an SSD card ejector pin, and above it, a hefty power adapter set. On one side you have the cloverleaf power cord, and on the other the 180 watt DC adapter body. The thermal conductor is from AOHi technology. The whole cable set is about 2.7 meters long, which is a really thoughtful detail. Whether you're at a desk or on the couch, you won't have to worry about where the outlet is, showing GPD's focus on practicality. Now for the design. The overall design of the GPD Win 5 immediately brings to mind the classic PSP, but the quality of the final unit is a huge improvement over the prototype. The body paint finish has a fine matte texture. There are no extra anti-scratch grooves, but it doesn't feel slippery when you actually hold it. Currently the device only comes in black, a typical GPD engineer aesthetic. However, I must mention a minor drawback. The finish easily picks up fingerprints. For someone like me with sweaty hands, the device can quickly become greasy, requiring frequent cleaning. The body seams are neatly processed. While not achieving a perfectly seamless fit, they are sufficiently tight. As for its appearance, that's a matter of personal taste. I personally find this compact and sturdy design to be quite appealing, yet what truly impressed me most about the Win 5 was its hand feel. As a larger GPD Win series model, its standalone weight is around 590 grams, with a center thickness of 24.6 millimeters. The 38.5 millimeter deep grip fits perfectly, and with the bare unit's well-controlled weight, it's not tiring to hold. I especially appreciate the removable battery design. However, with the battery installed, the total weight rises to 940 grams, the battery itself weighing 350 grams. When held suspended, it feels bottom heavy, putting some strain on your hands. It's much more comfortable when placed on your lap or a desk. However, GPD optimized this by including a 1.2 meter electromagnetic extension cable. Using it with a power bank means you're completely unfettered by power or weight, making the experience much lighter. The battery's power delivery is quite robust, supporting 70 watt TDP output with discharge power reaching over 120 watts. From full charge to 20% in the stress test, it remains stable, running at full throttle. But I must caution you, using the battery for extended periods at high TDP and power discharge isn't advised. The battery itself heats up, with the casing reaching 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. It's fine for short emergencies, but prolonged use will significantly shorten battery life. It's a massive strain. Many friends also asked if it can be powered by Type-C. After all, the original adapter is a bit bulky, but let me throw cold water on that idea first. The vast majority of PD power supplies on the market can't stably power the Win 5. So far in all the power banks I've tested, only the Lenovo Legion 140 watt can power it on and sustain a high power stress test. It supports a 20 volt 7 amp output and was designed for laptops. Other models like the Cooktech power bank can only turn it on if the battery is already inserted. By connecting power then removing the battery, low-note desktop use is uninterrupted for easy battery swaps. But playing Zenless Zone Zero at 30 watt TDP will instantly power it off. Charger choices are broader. The Cooktech 30 desktop charger with a 300 watt max output offers ample capacity. Its C port supports a 75 watt TDP single stress test, continuously discharging over 120 watts, and is stable for 50 watt TDP gaming. It offers stability and an adjustable DC power port, maximizing expandability. The ROG 140 watt single port charger can boot it up using only the C port, effortlessly handles a 70 watt TDP stress test, and prevents power loss during 50 watt TDP gaming, making it more portable than a desktop charger. Crucially, I advise against relying solely on Type-C for power, even with a DC adapter cable, as that cable simply converts PD to DC. It doesn't address the core issue of power supply load capacity. The AMD 395 processor's instantaneous peak power is very high, and most PD power devices aren't designed for this, failing to handle sudden loads, so power cuts are inevitable. When using Type-C power, keep the battery inserted. This allows the device to supplement power from the battery during high power spikes, preventing sudden shutdowns. This machine isn't cheap, so caution is wise. GPDs. The GPD Win 5 Sport configuration is very practical, fully meeting the dual needs of a handheld and a light PC. The top USB4 port supports data transfer and power, making it the core interface. When off, it can charge the battery around 70 watts. The bottom has a full C port, but it can't charge the host. The 525 spec DC port is the main power interface with excellent stability. When on, it charges the battery at 31 watts per hour, and also when off. The battery can be charged at around 70 watts when off. GPD hasn't forgotten the convenience of the USB-A port for external keyboards, mice, and flash drives. There's also a 3.5mm headphone jack, a TF card slot, and the newly added 1517 SSD interface. I tested it with a 1517 spec SSD, and its size is indeed very small, larger than a TF card, but smaller than an SD card when measured with software. and the read-write speed hit 1700 megabytes per second. This is after GPD optimized it to reduce speed because small SSDs generate significant heat. I tested it, and before the speed test concluded, the SSD temperature reached 78 degrees. The 1517 SSD's connector is metal. The thermal camera shows the card head at about 47 degrees, while the back grip nearby is in the 30s. After leaving a game running for 2 to 3 hours, the temperature still looked fine. During daily use, the card head area doesn't feel hot. I'm planning to use this SSD to install SteamOS for a dual boot experience. I'll make a separate video about that later, so follow me if you're interested. The GPD Win 5's joysticks and buttons have been completely optimized, offering better control than the previous generation. The joystick travel is longer than before, and my tests show no central dead zone, no lag, and no sticking. The control is very precise. After years, GPD finally reverted to conductive rubber for the ABXY buttons on the Win series. The buttons are slightly larger than the previous generation, feeling firm but providing clear feedback. The shoulder buttons are larger, use microswitches, and support full key activation. The triggers employ a linear design with moderate travel and no dead space at either end. However, the triggers on my internal unit feel a bit off. I've already informed GPD. This should be optimized later on. What's particularly noteworthy is that the triggers support switching between linear and non-linear modes via a toggle on the back, which activates a microswitch. Because it's a switchable trigger, the activation feels a bit stiff to the touch. Overall, since the Win 5 size has increased, the button layout is more spread out, so whether you have small or large hands, you'll find a comfortable grip. Regarding the GPD Win 5's performance, I'll start with the conclusion. The GPD Win 5's performance can easily handle 888 games at 1080p high settings. Its AMD 395 processor is key to this power. I tested 3D Mark Time SPI scores at 25 watts, 40 watts, 50 watts, 70 watts, and 80 watts, and the results were surprising. Below 25 watts, previous tests showed it was comparable to the 370 processor, sometimes better, sometimes worse. Slightly better at lower power. At 25 watts, the GPU scored 4095, outperforming the 370 at 30 watts. At 40 watts, the GPU hit 7197, double the 370's 30 watt score. At 50 watts, the GPU reached 9024, a significant jump. At 70 watts, it was 10448, stable under heavy load. At 80 watts, the GPU score was 10698. But the improvement over 70 watts is limited, and it generates significantly more heat, resulting in a less optimal user experience. For all subsequent tests, I will cap the power at 70 watts. Previously, some have stated that putting this type of processor in a handheld is pointless, but I disagree. Being able to fit a high-performance processor into such a small device perfectly embodies the engineer aesthetic. And what is the definition of a handheld anyway? As long as it can be held in your hand, and it meets your needs, it's a proper handheld. Let's run some benchmarks at a moderate 50 watts. Forza Horizon 5, 1080p high settings, 141 frames per second. Cyberpunk 2077, 1080p high settings, 91 frames per second. Black Myth, Wukong, 1080p high settings, 76 frames per second. Monster Hunter Wilds, 1080p high settings, 108 frames per second. Tomb Raider, 1080p ultra settings, 106 frames per second. No complex setup, just open the game and have a blast. That's the point of a high-performance handheld. With this much power, some friends might want to connect it to their monitors or portable screens, using it as a controller or playing with an external one. I also tested the game benchmarks at 50 watt TDP in 2K and 4K. At 2K, the frame rate on high settings can still run stably above 60 frames per second. At 4K, frame rates drop significantly, so you can either lower the quality or increase power consumption. However, this also highlights the processor's excellent performance, especially since its power draw is just 50 watts. The Win 5's maximum setting is 80 watts, which is considerably less than other high-performance devices. Many current 888 games aren't as demanding as some mobile-focused gacha games. Last year, 1080p, maxing out everything. In Abyss, it runs around 60 frames per second at 50 watts. For Wuthering Waves at 1080p max, map traversal is about 60 frames per second at 60 watts, suggesting optimization matters. Though power consumption exceeds phones like tablets, visual fidelity is far superior. Use your phone outdoors and the Win 5 at home for a full experience. I also tested PUBG at 45 watts TDP, 1080p triple ultra settings in open areas, over 100 frames per second, buildings around 80, 6 smoke grenades barely affected it. At 55 watts, spectating the final circle still gets 80 to 100 frames per second. Many worry low power consumption isn't achievable for small games, which is true. Manual TDP lock is needed. 10 watts TDP gets approximately 100 frames per second in Hades. 12 watts TDP runs Dave the Diver at full 1080p frame rate, and Ace Attorney is a piece of performance testing. Let's also check the frame rates and battery life at various power levels on battery. With Black Myth, Wukong at 1080p, all low settings at 10 watts, the device uses 18 watts for 4.2 hours of battery life at 51 frames per second. At 18 watts, it uses 29 watts watts for 2.6 hours at 100 frames per second. At 25 watts, it uses 38 watts, giving 2 hours of battery life with frame rates 165 frames per second. At 30 watts, the device uses 45 watts, lasting 1.7 hours at 181 frames per second. At 40 watts, it uses 58 watts, lasting 1.3 hours at 213 frames per second. At 50 watts, it uses 71 watts, lasting 1 hour at 224 frames per second. At 60 watts, it uses 85 watts, lasting 52 minutes at 233 frames per second. At 70 watts, it uses 100 watts, giving around 45 minutes of battery life at 232 frames per second. Low power battery life is good, and overall peripheral power consumption isn't excessive. With an external power bank, it can last a while outdoors. Many wonder about airflow and core temperatures, so we ran a dual stress test with FPU and thermal. The room was 26 degrees Celsius in my study with no AC and no battery installed. The airflow test distance was about 30 centimeters essentially, from a seated holding distance. At 40 watt TDP, core temp was 61 degrees Celsius, fan noise around 40 decibels. At 50 watt TDP, core temp was 68 degrees Celsius, fan noise around 44 decibels. At 70 watt TDP, core temp was 81 degrees Celsius, fan noise around 50 decibels. The fan noise is evident at high power. Game audio can mask it. For such a compact device to manage 70 watts, the fan must work hard. It's expected. It must perform. Cooling here is better than expected. With the battery at 40 watt TDP, core temps are 61 degrees, fan noise 40 decibels. At 50 watt TDP, core temps reach 69 degrees, fan noise 44 decibels. At 70 watt TDP, core temps are 84 degrees, fan noise about 49 decibels. Temps are slightly higher but similar to without the battery, so it won't impact the experience much. Previously GPD. Smaller devices always spark complaints of becoming too hot to hold, so let's examine this with a thermal camera. After 30 minutes of gaming at 70 watts while plugged in, the controller's grip area sits at approximately 30 degrees Celsius. Hotspots cleverly avoid the grip area, so there's no need to worry about it feeling too hot. The back grip's temperature performance is also very good. The screen and processor are back to back, and a teardown reveals an insulating electrical pin array between them, and the effect is quite good. The screen feels pretty warm to the touch, but the thermal imaging shows it's still within a reasonable range. This time, GPD really put effort into reducing weight. The fan covers are made of real carbon fiber, and each one reduces the weight by about 6 grams. I didn't test the screen and speakers this time, mainly because it's the same 7-inch 1080p 120Hz landscape screen with VRR support as the ROG Ally. And for a small screen, these specs are already top tier. Its performance has been proven on many other devices, so there's no need to worry. As for the speakers, the DTS tuning isn't finished yet. Once it's officially tuned, I'll release a follow-up video with a side-by-side comparison, so stay tuned for updates. Let's also briefly talk about the pre-sale versions of the GPD Win 5 to help you choose based on your needs. First is the 385 processor version, which comes standard with 32GB of RAM and 1TB SSD for a pre-sale price of 8,699 yuan, offering great value. The 385 CPU is a top mobile processor, and its 32CU GPU meets gaming and office needs. Though online tests are few, our Win 5 tests show little difference from the 395, only about a 10% score gap in high power use. The 385 uses a single CCD design, and the CPU's internal CPU memory bandwidth is about 50% of the 395's, and we can also predict that the leaked 388 version will be similar. However, the GPU memory bandwidth of both is nearly identical, and the 385's performance is sufficient for most uses, so the game frame rate difference isn't extreme.